welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have Diogo Mónica from Anchorage. Diogo, pleasure to meet you, to see you, and to have you here at our office. Great portfolio company. Tell us, who is Diogo? How did you start? Where did you study? What did you specialize in?
Yeah, I usually say this is a long story, medium type of story. Not really. Let's not go for the full version, but something in between in terms of condensed. But something interesting is that I was born in the United States. So I was born in California, which was incredibly lucky because it gave me an American passport and double citizenship, which is turned out was very useful later on to then go to the United States and start a company. But I was only in the United States until 3 years old. My dad was in the Portuguese Navy.
Right.
My mom and my dad went there with my sister, and then I ended up coming back. So I consider myself to be, from an education perspective, I'm Portuguese. And I grew up in Portugal, and I ended up becoming very interested in computer security and programming. At 12 years old, my dad taught me how to do computer programming, and the first thing that I had the inkling to do was create computer Trojan horses and little applications that controlled computers and things like that, which, at the time was incredibly fun.
Which year was this, more or less?
Yeah, this was 90 something. I was 12, so yeah, 90 something. I was born in 86.
86, yeah.
So
I was in Técnico in the mid 90s, and you were already playing with computers before you went to Técnico.
That's right, way before I went to Técnico. And really, that was the start of my career. I think sometimes people ask me, what is my superpower? And this is a slightly shitty superpower, but what I tell them is I've always had a straight line in terms of path that I wanted to follow. There's been very little doubt or, different paths. And so I've always had like a very clear guiding star of what I wanted to do. And specifically at 14 years old, after learning how to program, I realized that computer security was what I wanted to do, which then led me to do a bachelor's, a master's in network communication engineering in Técnico, and then later on a Ph.D. in computer science, also in Técnico.
Which is where you met Christina, right?
That's exactly right. So Christina and I were in the same university, same course. Christina was the year prior to mine, and we knew each other and we hung out all the time. And it was actually a really great set of individuals and people, and now we have lots of companies that were created from those, and it's pretty fun to catch up.
But it's really funny that by the age of 14 you kind of knew already that you really What got you so into it? I mean, what did you find exciting about security, cybersecurity?
It's interesting. I don't know how to answer that question. is the short answer, but I'll tell you that my dad was university professor. He was a PhD in signal processing. He had written books about network communications. And so I think that is the answer. He had a book about network communications that I started reading when I was very young, that on the back page actually listed my name. So Diogo, there was a bunch of bullet points of what the book was talking about, and the bullet points actually formed the word Diogo. So, things like that were very unique for me.
Excited you.
And so incited me to study and to understand the book. And I was talking about very early on about what IPv6 was going to be, and network communication protocols and all these different things. So I think to a certain extent, my dad did what all parents out there kind of want to do, which is push their children to do something that they think is good without pushing them away from it, which is the other reverse here. And now as a newfound dad, as a newly minted dad, I'm afraid of that too, right? If I push my son too far off towards one direction, they'll rebel and do the exact opposite.
But it worked out with you.
It worked out with my dad specifically.
Exactly.
So there's this illusion of choice that I was choosing something that I was unique, but no, my dad had it all planned out. But that was what happened. And if you recall, there was no computer security masters, nothing back then. And so network,
at least not here.
And network communication was really the closest that you could get to security. So that's why I started going deep down that rabbit hole. And then later on, the PhD was in distributed systems at the Anchorage at the Distributed Systems Group, GSD, because again, there was no cybersecurity PhDs back then, really. The distributed systems was the academic representation of security, right? Byzantine fault tolerance, etc., which is incredibly interesting because it was what got me interested in the Satoshi white paper afterwards. The Satoshi white paper has over half of the bibliography, so the papers that it actually references were papers that I referenced in my master's and PhD thesis. So when I read the paper for the first time, I was working exactly in the same area with Hashcash, with Byzantine fault tolerance, with solving the Sybil identity. Obviously, I was not applying it to monetary policy. I was applying it to security and identity and voting and more general distributed systems problems. But immediately it clicked for me. It's like, oh, this is unique. This is like a different take on solving this particular problem with proof of work. In that case, do Source Hashcash.
And you saw the paper right when it came out, or when did you read the first, the Satoshi paper?
Yeah, so the Satoshi paper, the first time that I read it was actually in 2000 and I want to say 11 or 12. I don't recall exactly, but I was already at Square. Right. So during my PhD, I was lucky enough to go to a couple of conferences in the United States. And then Google and Facebook got me interested in doing a potential, take a few months out of my PhD to work for them. And then I realized that I didn't really want to work at a big company. And so if Google and Facebook were interested, surely other companies would be interested too.
And why did you decide that? Why did you decide not to go into the big company?
I think
Christina said the same, by the way. That's why she started TalkDesk.
It's very clear. I think if you are lucky enough to at some point have a mental model in your mind where you're going towards the steepest learning curve that you can find around you, and you're going towards a mode of you want to maximize learning and impact, then all of a sudden being at a big company is the exact opposite, right? If I went to Google, I was going to be a drop in an ocean of security people. And so when I saw Square had raised the Series A, founded by Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, there was only one person in security at the time. And when I got accepted, there was less than 30 people. And when I joined, I was employee 40th. And so I knew that I was going to work on everything. There was nothing that I was not going to work on. And it was a payments company, which is the highest level of security that at the time we had because we didn't have crypto assets back then.
Of course, Google and other companies also have sort of super high-end people and so on. But you just found that the smaller environment allowed you to grow faster.
Yes. I think Google and Facebook would allow me to go in depth to one specific topic very deeply. And they're world-class teams, and you can learn so much from them. And then throughout the years, over the past 15 years, I've gotten to know them really well, and they're amazing.
Amazing companies.
Amazing companies. Google has probably the best security team in the world. Apple probably has the second best security team in the world. These companies are truly amazing at security. But it is not the breadth that a young PhD student first job should actually be looking towards.
And when you joined Square, did you see what it could become? What was your idea about Square at the time?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I thought the product was fascinating. So for people that don't know, but Square is started out by being a little credit card reader that you plugged on your dongle, so the headphone dongle, and allowed anyone anywhere to accept a credit card. That was the basic conceptual model here.
Which was revolutionary.
It was revolutionary. But actually, so my dad had this thing like, that is a stupid idea. Nobody will ever hand over the credit card for somebody else to swipe on their own phones. And you can kind of see the logic behind it. But of course, in the United States, it's kind of a different mode. There's credit card, anti-fraud, the consumer is never liable for anything. And so we worked extremely well. In hindsight, obviously, is always 2020, but I was excited. And so I think the answer to your question is, it was more important for me that it was payments because I wanted to do security at the highest levels. And at the time, the highest levels of security outside of nuclear launch codes in military was obviously going to be payments and protecting people's money.
Did you finish the PhD in the meanwhile, or?
Yes, absolutely. So I went to Square. I had already finished all the classwork, and I was able to effectively moonlight the PhD while I was working, which, by the way, incredibly hard. Very, very hard thing to do simultaneously, but I was able to publish more papers, present them, finish the thesis, and present it here in Lisboa.
So when did you stay in Square, and what did you do?
Yeah, so I joined Square in early 2011, and I joined as the second person on the security team. And then later on, for the next 4 years, I was there for 4 years. I ended up doing everything from hardware security to software security to infrastructure security to compliance to, it really was from Series A company, 40 people, to publicly traded company with thousands of people.
Amazing. So you saw the whole rocket ship thing.
That's right. And I still believe today that people talk a lot about how failure allows you to learn. I actually have this kind of opinion that failure allows you to learn very little because you don't know what caused it to fail. So it's very hard for you to distinguish the things that worked and the things that don't work that ultimately led to the demise of the company. However, if a company succeeds, you know that no matter what failures were around, the main things that were done correctly and allow the company to succeed. And so you can learn 100 times more from success than you can from failure.
Right. I guess in both situations, you need some detailed analysis on what happened, right? And
That's right.
I guess what people say about failure is that it sort of leaves such a deep mark on you, such like a bad example of stuff that shouldn't have happened, that you kind of, supposedly you think deeply about what went wrong, right? I guess that's why people say.
Yeah, but I found that people carry those scars and they become a little bit more risk averse and then they end up actually not taking the next opportunities. So Square was a perfect example of a massive success. The engineering culture, the leadership, the product, the type of growth, everything. It it was fantastic. Before I went to the United States, I always harbored this idea that I want to create my own company. I think part of it was like this, ego-driven thing of I've read TechCrunch. I saw how the United States saw all the CEOs and saw all of these people and these founders and how much like they elevated them in society. Right. It's like this feeling of like you're creating something that society wants and is willing to pay for.
Right.
And that was beautiful. And in the United States at Square, I finally got to see that from the inside. And by the way, I realized the amount of hubris of me even thinking that I could have started a company before going through all these experiences.
Sometimes a little bit too much of ego. We'll get to that when we talk about crypto.
100%.
But so what happened after that? Where did you go?
So it was 4 years at Square. And then after Square, I went to a company called Docker. The reason why I did the transition is I realized that at Square, everything that I built was to serve internal customers. And what I mean by that is Square serves small merchants and now larger merchants. But you never go to a merchant and say, hey, how do you like the security of your credit cards?
It's supposed to work, right?
Yeah, it's just supposed to work. Then they're going to ask you, I should be concerned about that?
Right, exactly.
So you don't want to...
Is that an issue?
That's right. Is that an issue? Should I be thinking about this? And so it's not a product that I sold. And so that I was always building internally. And I loved it, but I was always building it internally. And so Docker was a company that was growing absolutely at rates that were just absolutely insane. It was everywhere. It was an open source company that I had never done. So I wanted to see that. And it was a company that it was obvious that the way that I was going to monetize was going to be selling security, security, product security features, etc. And so I knew I was going to have sales experience, product security building experience, customer relationship experience, and obviously open source experience. So that was going to be very important to me if I did want to go on the path of creating my own company.
That's a very interesting point. So a lot of entrepreneurs come to us, and they've just came out of their Ph.D. or university, and they want to start a company immediately. I mean, Christina's an example of that and did it very well. But many others don't do very well. Was it important to have other experiences before launching your own company?
100%. Not everybody can be Christina. And to a large extent, I'm sure Christina suffered a lot more than she would have if she had seen it done right at least a couple of times. So for me, it was that moment when I joined Square and I saw what a world-class team executing at a world-class level, building a world-class product with world-class people looked like. I realized how inadequate I was and how much I didn't know. And that's actually probably what led me to then not after Square create my own company immediately, because I did have the opportunity to do so. In fact, I had term sheets to go build my own company, a key management security company. And I, even with term sheets, even with an idea, even with a co-founder, which is now my co-founder of Anchorage Digital, because Nathan and I actually joined Square the same week. 12 years ago. So that story is also pretty fun how, meeting a co-founder, somebody that I met 12 years ago because we joined Square the same week.
You trust each other.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was that actually led us to say, no. We can't create a company right now, but we don't know much about sales. We don't know much about open source. We don't know much about all these things that we believe that a company that we're going to create to security engineers is likely going to need.
Right. And what happened at Docker?
Docker was not a success. So it was a tremendous success from an engineering perspective in the sense that my code runs on billions of servers on the internet. And as an engineer, that's the thing that you're the most proud of, right? It's amazing. From a commercial perspective, Docker was a failure. So it was not able to monetize the open source software then. Now Docker is incredibly successful again. Right. So it went through this arc. Docker is an amazing company because it started out as DocCloud, founded by Solomon Hykes, French entrepreneur that came to the United States through YC. DocCloud was a Heroku competitor and failed. And in the process of failing, when they were about to shut down the company, they created Docker. And then Docker kind of like breathed new life into DocCloud. They renamed the company after this thing that they had created because the company was called DocCloud. And then Docker became a massive success, raised at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, $300 million raised from all the best investors, the benchmarks, the Sequoias, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it failed to monetize, got totally recapped and completely turned around. Then all the investors basically left except, I believe, Benchmark and Inside Partners. And then they reinvested into Series A of a new Docker with the IP, having sold the enterprise side. And now Docker is a massive success again. Yeah. Another multi-billion-dollar company, but this time around with revenue behind it versus just excitement in downloads. So that one is an experience that is pretty fun to also have seen. But while I was there, we didn't become a commercial success, even though obviously it became an extremely, extremely successful open source software.
Very interesting. So which year did you leave?
I left Docker in 2017 because it was in 2017, while at Docker, that there was this fund that reached out to me because they had lost the passphrase to a $1.5 million Bitcoin wallet. and offered me 20% if I could break into it. So this was my introduction to,
and how did that go?
That went extremely well. It was a lot easier than you'd expect, because really the reality was that very sophisticated investors were not very sophisticated when it came to key management.
No.
And so the reality is that was when I realized, actually, no, that's when I realized that there was something there. And so I started doing consulting for all these funds until it took me way too long. I should have realized it sooner, but 9 months after doing so much consulting that I almost barely had enough time to do my day job, I realized, no, this is a company. And I had been lucky enough to have been working with my co-founder, Nathan, for 7 years, both at Square and Docker, because we had joined the company together. And so it was just the right moment, the right opportunity for us to start this. So I stayed at Docker from early 2015 to late 2017. And I started Anchorage at the end of 2017.
And how did the idea come up? I mean, did you have the idea that what the company is today, or did it start with a different idea?
No, the idea was really just solve these clients' problems. They were coming to me asking me to help them just do good operational security. It was not just the how do I do key management and how do I store Bitcoin and how do I store these crypto assets. It was how do I care about my personal safety? How do I care about which computers do I use? These are irrecoverable. There's no clawback. If these assets are stolen, they're gone forever. And so this is a very heightened type of security, way more than your personal Gmail or your personal Facebook. And so the idea came just out of, we need to solve this client's needs. And by the way, that's the history of Square of Anchorage in general. The history of Anchorage is effectively going after what the clients are demanding in terms of products. How does that work? Well, the beginning, the basic was there was no institutional custody product that had the same safety parameters of cold storage, but allowed investors to use them on a regular basis. So access them fast, stake with all these new assets, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the original conceptualization of Anchorage Digital, was a platform that allowed people to securely store all of these assets that were coming out and being launched. But then if you're serving institutions, the next question from an institution is, hey, wouldn't it be great if this is regulated? In fact, in the United States, if you're an RIA, a registered investor advisor, which effectively means they're your funds with over $150 million of other people's money, you must use a third-party qualified custodian. So the question was, how do we become a qualified custodian? And that was what started on the path to get Anchorage Digital Bank, the first federally chartered bank in the US. So it became the first and still the only federally chartered crypto bank under the OCC with the same charter as JP Morgan Chase, serving crypto assets.
Which is a huge differentiation.
Major differentiation from a compliance perspective and from a regulatory perspective. And then after that, the clients started asking us, hey, I love to store assets here, but can I buy and sell from you? Why would I buy and sell from somewhere else and then store them with you? Hey, I have this asset that does this thing called staking. Can I stake it? Can I do governance? Can I vote on these assets? Can I actually allow them to use how they're supposed to? Can I borrow against collateral? Can I do all of these different things? So everything that we've done has always been out of client demand. Because
which is the way that it should be, right? Because you're following the money, basically, right?
That's right. And I do think that there's other CEOs and there's other founders that see something. They have a vision of something. I guess the canonical example is the iPhone, right? And Steve Jobs. And they see a version of the future that only they see, and they kind of like attempt to bring that to life.
That's even harder, right?
That is so much harder than this mode of operation.
You might get it, or you might be totally wrong.
Yeah,
right?
and in many cases, I think this is the problem with, I guess, in your line of jobs, your line of business, how do you invest in a consumer company? It's extremely hard to understand if consumers are going to like this, because you can't ask them. No. Even if you ask them, they're not going to tell you the truth. And I guess
the other problem is, very, very smart founders like you that only care about the product, but don't actually follow, what is the problem, they don't try to solve the problem of the customer. They come, go and develop this crazy stuff, which is super, super smart, but then nobody actually uses it, right? Which is the problem. Right. And you were developing something that actually clients were asking for. Right?
That's right. And for every single product that we've had and that we've built, there's been a client wanting to pay for it behind it.
Now, when you started this idea and the company, you had been following crypto for quite some time, since the Satoshi maybe paper. Right?
Interested originally in 2011, but on the academic side of things, not on the monetary policy. So I bought very little just to play with it. It was really in 2013. And then later on in 2015, when I really like this second wind of, I now understand the monetary policy implication. Again, I was very young when the 2008 great financial crisis happened. And so this bailout of the banks, I knew of it, but it wasn't really like,
didn't affect you.
The ethos of Bitcoin wasn't intuitive to me. in 2011 when I started reading about it. This whole kind of like Federal Reserve printing money and saving out, and kind of like the inflationary properties of the dollar and the need for a deflationary currency, and all of these things were things that I just picked up later.
So it clicked for you. It made sense as an asset class, has a different way of organizing.
That's right. That's right. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I think there's really like this fork in the road of either you legitimately don't want to see it and you become a full skeptic and you don't really rationally engage with some of these arguments, and you're just like off in like some other land where you just, you don't care about it and you don't care to care about it. Or once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee these characteristics. And then the pandemic happened, and then, regardless of the performance of the actual price, and we can discuss like what the multivariate analysis can be done on Bitcoin and all these overlapping narratives of why Bitcoin has a price and why it doesn't have a price. But the reality of it is that everybody said that in the United States, we were never going to have inflation. We had historically low inflation. And then all of a sudden, 80% of all the dollars ever printed have been printed in the past 3 years. Yeah. 80%, which is an absolutely insane. And we're suffering now a double-digit inflation in Europe and very high single-digit inflation in the United States. And that's real. It's real. And it's one of the things that leads and pushes Bitcoin forward. It is the ability to opt out of the financial system of your own country. There's this concept in every country has, and every citizen of a country should have the right of exit. You should have the right to exit your own country. It's one of the basic tenets of human rights. And there's no such tenet for your financial instruments and for your finances. You can leave the country, but you can't take anything with you. And Bitcoin allows you to have the right of exit of your current financial system, which I think is something that needs to exist.
Yes. I'd love to know your view on blockchain more in general, right? I mean, we're talking about crypto and we'll go there in a moment, but what about blockchain in general and that whole revolution? Do you think this is going to change everything?
I would say that the best application of blockchain really is crypto assets, because the best application of blockchain is the ability of having transparency and consensus in a set of entities that are participating in a system where they don't trust each other. So if you take trust off of a system and you make people collaborate, a blockchain ensures that everybody has the same view over it, and there's transparency over what's actually there and what's not there, and who owns what, and who transacted and who did what. So that's the basic conceptual model here. But in crypto assets, it's absolutely necessary because you're doing it on the internet. There's other use cases for which is very interesting, but I think there's a lot less interest in tracking the provenance of wine on the blockchain. It might be interesting, but you can kind of make an argument that if you trust a producer of wine, which you kind of already do because the wine comes from a producer, then they could also have a centralized or a semi-decentralized solution that is, an API that is open.
Blockchain, the whole decentralized concept is going to invade software in everything in terms of changing, language.
Not everything. I think there are things that it will. And I think decentralization, maybe we take a step back, and there is something very true about the ethos of blockchain that people have to realize, which is you were there. When we invented the internet, it was an open system. Yeah. What we call now Web 1, it was an open system. HTTP is an open protocol. TCP/IP is an open protocol. DNS is open protocol. There's no centralized entity that is actually organizing this. You can create your own email. You can run your own servers. It was somewhere along the line that we did what we now call the cardinal sin of the internet. The cardinal sin of the internet was ads. We didn't add a monetization layer or internet native money from day one. And so we had to monetize the internet somehow. And the way that we did it, we just applied a TV model of ads to the internet. Right. And that is the cardinal sin of the internet, because it then led all sorts of bad behavior. It incentivized centralization. It incentivized collection of data. So the ads are actually more targeted towards individual, and it incentivized aggregation of massive amounts of data, of massive amounts of user, and created this weird freemium model where the incentives of the network are not the incentives of the user, and you are not aligned with YouTube, and you are not aligned with Facebook, and you are definitely not aligned with Google. That is a big issue. We started with free and open and protocols that collaborate with each other to a completely centralized, a couple of balkanization of the internet. A couple of companies actually control it. Decentralization, it's a pendulum. It swings on both sides. Decentralization is the pendulum swinging now to the other side. Maybe not fully to the other side, but some sane middle ground that is not one company having 3 billion users in being literally the largest nation on earth right now. Like, there's no country on earth that has more of a population than Facebook does. Yeah. That is scary. That's absolutely scary. And TikTok is almost there too. And so if you think about it that way, and if you think of the internet as permeating our lives and us spending more and more time on the internet, these sort of become real countries and become very powerful companies. So we need to take the power from their hands and empower the users to do what they want. So yes, I do think that blockchains in general and the decentralized aspects of DeFi, decentralized aspects of smart contracts will allow us to have self-sovereign identity, self-sovereign data, and really pull back from this weird model with broken incentives that we have right now. And I think that is extremely important to do. But many of the use cases that we talked about blockchain around like tracking and supply chain, I don't think those need to particularly use it. I think technology has some angles in which different countries collaborating on the same supply chain actually are mutually non-trusting in many cases, and it allows for a solution. But I think there's other solutions
trust is the key here, right?
Trust is the key here.
There's no issues with trust or no big issues with trust.
Then all of a sudden,
value added
is not as exactly.
Now, tell us where is Anchorage right now? How did this path go? You have amazing investors. We're very lucky to be part of that team of investors. How did things go since 2017 until now?
Yeah, so company is now just over 5 years old. We have just under 400 employees. We raised just under $500 million. We are a Series D company, and we are valued just over $3 billion. We have moved on chain tens of billions of dollars, hopefully soon being hundreds of billions of dollars moved of value on chain. And we've stored tens of billions of dollars on the platform, which is absolutely amazing. We have some of the biggest clients in the world, anywhere from very large corporates like Visa to the biggest banks in the world, to sovereign wealth funds, to government entities, to all of the crypto funds and VC firms you've ever heard of. Every single one of them is a client of Anchorage. And so it's been a tremendous journey. There's also been punctuated and kind of like overlaid on the booms and busts of crypto, which has been very interesting as a founder to run this. In 2017, we raised money, Series A at the peak, and then 2018 was just like absolutely like just crypto winter.
ICO
That's right.
Chaos.
Okay,
right?
Completely. Yeah. And then it came up again, and then it crashed down again, and it came back in 2021, and now crashed again into doldrums. So we're kind of used to it.
People must be telling you all the time, "Oh, you're gonna be out of business, right?" But not really.
yeah. It's just like, okay, get in line, right? I mean, exactly. This has been said many times before. I think there's a website that tracks. It's called the Bitcoin Obituary. The number of times journalists have called
this is the end.
the death of Bitcoin, and there's kind of like 900 and something articles of real journalists and real articles saying that's going to die. And obviously, all of them were wrong and continue to be wrong, and will continue to be wrong. And so, Anchorage has been an amazing journey of learning. You can look at many of our accomplishments, the chartered bank, the amount of assets on the platform, the types of clients that we have, the first ones to really have a sovereign wealth fund.
The fact that you're becoming the institutional bank.
That's right. And then recent events have been actually like proving that our model was the right model from the start. I think in a bull market, everybody forgets how much regulation matters for institutions. Absolutely. And so post FTX and post the collapse of FTX and potential theft and fraud and the fact that they were offshore and unregulated, turns out that it's incredibly important for you to ask questions like, where are you regulated? Are you a bank? Are you bankruptcy remote?
This has been a bit of a problem in crypto for many years, right?
It has.
I mean, even at the time of the ICOs, people would say, "Oh, VC is going to end. We don't need VC anymore, or we don't need this or that." And there's been this kind of religious aspect to crypto, which sometimes is a bit overdone and also takes credibility out of crypto, right? Not to mention the Lamborghinis, but it's a bit too much. Why has the community not learned with this?
Well, let me just say the following: if you are to create a world's currency, if you were to create a market cap of assets at some point, $3 trillion was the market cap. And you can say that the lack of liquidity makes it not really 3 trillion, but
sure.
Trillions of dollars of value. You need religion. It is a necessary condition. You cannot, we have a prophet, Satoshi Nakamoto, which is anonymous. Right. It's like you have the whole thing. It was the only way for this to exist. Right. I think now, yes, we need a religion, and we have religion. We'll always have zealotry, and we'll always have jihad, like religious war. That's what it is between these assets. Right. It's complete jihad. But it's because people care deeply, and money is so personal. And part of the reason why there are so many skeptics is because they've been taught for all of their lives that money is one thing, and then they realize that money is actually another thing.
Right.
And so all of this is like very emotional, and money is very near and dear to us. Now that the industry is professionalizing, I think we're taking some of those rough edges out of it, and there will still be religious zealotry, and there will still be all of these religious wars, but there's also like institutions and founders that are creating real companies and real infrastructure and making just the industry flourish.
Amazing. Very good. Diogo, it was a pleasure to have you at Indico. Congratulations on all the work. We're looking forward to all the progress, and welcome to the Red Chair. Good to see you guys.